All right, I got 0900, so let's get this started. I appreciate you all being here. This is a pretty special opportunity from where I stand, really special. The chance to have an industry giant come and talk is always incredible, to listen to kind of the leadership tips and the career path stuff, but to have an industry giant who's one of our own is even more special. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start, and usually I don't go into big bios, and our guest of honor doesn't really want me reading his bio to you all, but I'll try to blow through it in a couple minutes because it's just important to kind of hear the career path that is so different from what we kind of typically hear. So I think that's really important. Then I'm going to introduce him to say a few words, kind of stand-up fashion, and then we're going to sit down and I'm going to ask him a few questions, and if you all have some questions too, we'd like to take those in. And then we're going to wrap this up by 2 minutes of 10, right? That's what all the faculty have told me. You all have stuff to do and places to be. So we got a busy day. Our guest of honor is Leo Topalian, and he's President and Chief Executive Officer of Nucor Corp. Now Nucor, as you may know, is one of the largest steel manufacturers in the world, and located right here in the United States. He joined Nucor in 1996, and he's held various leadership positions, as you might imagine, over his career with them, including operations manager in Western Australia and business development manager in South Carolina. So the message there is you got to be ready to move around if you're going to build your leadership bio with any companies you're working for. Then in 2014, he was named Vice President and General Manager of Nucor Yamato Steel Company. 2014, let's start that clock. In May of 2017, blink of an eye later, he was appointed Executive Vice President of Beam and Plate Products for Nucor. So these big multinational companies have these other companies in their subdivisions, and he was stepping up in the leadership role there. In September 2019, he was appointed President and Chief Operating Officer of Nucor. So the nuts and bolts of keeping the stuff running. And then on January 1st, 2020, he became President and Chief Executive Officer of Nucor. So think about that run from 2014 to 2020, what life must have been like in the Topalian home during those years. But when he took over as CEO, you get that opportunity to kind of start driving the culture of the organization you work for. And he really did a couple things. He challenged the company's more than 26,000 employees, who they called teammates, AKA shipmates, to make Nucor the world's safest steel company. And they continue to do things that the steel industry never thought were attainable. He's focusing on harnessing a special culture at Nucor to grow the company, expand the business, and to take the company to new heights, all while really living the corporate culture of the company. Now he serves on a number of board of directors. So as a board member for Nucor Yamato, where he used to work, one of the sub-companies, and on the executive committee of the World Steel Association. So this is someone who's known in this steel industry worldwide. Additionally, he's the chairman of the American Iron and Steel Institute, and just this week, not even in his bio on his website yet, he was named vice chair of the World Steel Association. So pretty impressive and quite a run. Leon graduated, as I said, from the Massachusetts Maritime Academy. Yeah. Family really thrilled about that. With a Bachelor of Science degree in marine engineering. Any marine engineers in the crowd? He's here today with his wife, Kim, and 3 of their 4 children, JT, Isabella, and Sophia. Hannah could not make it. And he's here with a number of his family. And if I go and introduce them all, it's going to chew up the entire hour. So with that, let me just introduce one of our very own, CEO, Leon.
Yeah, I got to tell you, you got an amazing president, Rear Admiral McDonald, over the last couple of years, and kind of reaching back out and connecting with the Academy. I got to tell you, your passion, your enthusiasm, your excitement for the Academy is infectious. And so, for all of you that don't get to see what he does every day, he represents this Academy incredibly well in industry, in the community, and beyond. And so, just such a great job. You and your team have done incredible things here, and I'm so proud to be back here. I want to thank my wife, Kim, because as Rear Admiral McDonald mentioned, there's been a lot of change in the 30 years since I graduated. It's 10 moves, 2 continents, 4 kids, 1 grandbaby, 1 daughter-in-law, and a whole lot of miles in between. And so, like you, many years ago, I was sitting there and maybe listening to a speaker that had come in. I had no idea what I wanted to do, 0. And what I'd love to tell you is I had all the choices in the world because my 4.0 was really going to open doors for me, except I didn't have a 4.0 or a 3.0. So any of you in the room that can identify with 2 somethings, man, it is not your defining legacy. It's just not. I grew up in a home in New England with parents that were just blue collar and middle class, and man, taught me some values very early in my life: my faith, my family, and my company in Nucor, in that order. And so the other thing that they instilled in us very early on was a work ethic. And so for me, as I got ready to think about college, I sort of knew I wouldn't be able to make it through a traditional engineering program. Given the opportunity to go party or study, I'm probably going to do the opposite. And so I took a class at Cape Cod Community College, and there was a lady in there that kept hounding me. Hey, what are you doing? What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And I'm like, I have no idea, right? And I didn't know at the time she'd worked at Mass Maritime, and she kept just introducing, and long story short, the connection happened. I applied, I got in, and I would tell you, outside of my family, my kids, and my grandbaby, this academy has been one of the most profound things that's ever happened to me in my life. And again, I didn't know exactly what that would look like when I was sitting here in 87 through 91. But the doors that opened because of the work in graduating from here have been incredible. And to make a difference, to make an impact in people's lives is he had mentioned we don't call our team members employees, because to us, there's a difference. An employee has a job. A team member has a vested interest in their own future. It's an entrepreneurship, and it's a partnership. Because my job as CEO of the 31,000 team members we have in our company is to serve them, not the other way around. My job is to work for them. My job is to serve them. And again, embracing that and having the courage to say, my job as a servant-hearted leader is to make sure we take great care of them. And you'll hear more about that as we talk about safety and later on in the day, or at least maybe some of you will. Because at the end of the day, our 31,000 team members love our company, but they're there for a reason. And that reason is simple. It's either to provide for themselves, their families, their kids, their grandkids, to make a living. And when they can do that in an environment where they know I and our executive team cares as much about them and their future and their families and their well-being as we do our own, amazing things happen. Amazing things transform. And so the foundation of graduating from here opened doors I never, ever anticipated. And so what I would tell you is whatever paradigm or maybe no paradigm you have of steelmaking, it's okay. Because some of you are going to end up in careers that you had no idea sitting here today that you were going to end up in. But I think that is the incredible opportunity that affords you graduating from Mass Maritime. Your skill set in leadership and in development and being organized and having the tools and skills and attributes that this academy affords you transfer anywhere, across any sector in any business. And so, again, I couldn't be more excited to be here today. I look forward to the Q&A, and I don't want to chew up a whole lot of time other than thanking my wife, our entire family for being here today. It's really a unique honor to be back here and so many years later. And again, thank you all for your attention, and look forward to the Q&A.
Great, wonderful. We're gonna bust out a couple mics here as well, just so if our folks are watching online, they can hopefully hear us. And then I hope as we get this next 45 minutes or 50 minutes going, that if there are some questions from you all, please throw a hand up, or if he gives an answer and you're like, boy, could you expand on that a little? You will not be interrupting me if you throw your hand up as we go through some of this Q&A. Because really, the intent is to try to throw these up as not really softballs, but just to get the conversation going on this incredibly unique path. You talked a little bit about growing up, but will you start a little bit more on growing up? You made the connection to Mass Maritime, but I'd love you to also talk about those first days at Mass Maritime, going through as a first-year student, and how you got to and through this incredible institution.
Yeah, getting through was a lot of prayer and a lot of fun. And so, again, when I got here, I was ready for, sort of the discipline side. I was ready to make that challenge. For me, it was, could I actually focus enough to study? Because again, at the time, I don't know that I really recognized the doors that might be open if I worked harder in my grades. And again, I had a great time. And again, I don't just mean party. I mean, I just had a great time. Made so many great, long-lasting friendships. And again, the camaraderie of the academy for me was inspiring. And so, again, just being here with you all today is awesome. And so, you work, and all of you, walk through that. And so for me, those opportunities as I walked through the academy and got through the academy academically were really very special. And so I joined Westinghouse right out of the academy, and that began the journey, right? That began the opening of those doors.
Right. Let me ask a follow-up on Westinghouse and that first career. Was Westinghouse here recruiting, and in your senior year, did you step up and go to the recruiting fairs and the company visits?
Yeah, it was. They were recruited here. And any seniors in the room? Awesome. It was really cool. So Westinghouse came here, recruited here for their field engineering, and I ended up going there and joining their nuclear engineering field service group. But what's really cool, the first interviews were here, and then you were invited to Orlando, their headquarters, for the follow-up interviews. And I'll never forget, because there were groups of 10 for about 10 weeks. They brought 10 people in every week from all over the country to interview. And so I was the only Mass Maritime in the group I was in. And we're sitting there getting ready to walk into this huge auditorium filled with people and have to present our stuff. And one of the other kids that was there interviewing was in his suit, and he came over to me because I had our dress blues on. He's like, "Look, I know nothing about you, but you look freaking intimidating." And I got him on the spot, right? And I thought that's a great sign. And so again, there was an edge. There was a difference in being from the academy that was sought and seen very early on.
Wonderful. We push that a lot with the students to take advantage of the work Career Services does, and this entire regiment has stepped up. The career fair was last week. 180 companies were here, and nearly 1,000 cadets stopped what they were doing to go through. So for you seniors, did you get some value from that career fair and things are rocking and rolling? That's good to hear. We talked for a little bit. We have core values here: discipline, knowledge, leadership, this idea of the shipmate mentality. Will you talk a little bit about Nucor, and it's clear you got some passion there. Will you talk a little bit about the core values and how you walk that walk?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we have some of our kids here. Our son Jonathan is the oldest, and as he was getting ready to leave college and go into the workforce, one of the things that I'm not sure he appreciated, and I don't know the range of yours, but as you're evaluating companies, at least for me, man, I wanted a job. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted a job. I wanted to be able to start my life and paying for things and beginning that journey. I didn't know enough to know I ought to be interviewing them, and I ought to be asking some questions about what are your values? How do you treat team members internal within the company? Because if you're making all the money in the world, the title's great, and everyone there is stabbing each other in the back, and it's a horrible environment, you're going to be miserable. Because again, the academy doesn't bore you that way. That's not the institution's values. And so when I started in nuclear power, I mean, it was fine, it was okay, but it was so bureaucratic. Working for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is proceduralized and boring and painstaking as anything I'd ever been a part of. And I knew I wanted more, I just didn't know what. And so when I found Nucor, I found this incredible marriage, and again, didn't know it early on, where I joined a team where I didn't have to kiss somebody's backside, I didn't have to golf, I didn't have to know the right person or the right people to talk to. I got recognized in an environment where your intellect, work ethic, and passion made all the difference in the world. And so I didn't have to worry about my next job. When you did a great job at what you were doing, somebody else recognized it and gave you an opportunity and said, hey, you're ready for the next, and the next, and the next. And you can ask him. 25 years ago, we were sitting at our little kitchen table, and I said, man, if someday I could just be a supervisor, that's all I'd ever want. If just a supervisor.
I'll never ask for more.
Someday if I could just be a manager, someday if I could just be a GM or a VP, and the next opportunities just came through that hard work, and again, that culture within Nucor exemplified my own personal culture and how my sister and I were raised, and the value set that I have in my life that I didn't have to compromise. I didn't have to be somebody different inside of our company as I was outside with my family.
Sounds like a great fit, and I love your philosophy there. When I came back to work here, I worked for a guy we both know, Al Wilson, and I thought, gosh, if things go right, I could be the head of placement here one day. So funny things happen. We pride ourselves on being good stewards of the environment. Everything from the wind turbine to the photovoltaics, the investment, and the focus of that in nearly every undergraduate degree program, some connection to that. Can you talk a little bit about your role with Nucor? I think steel, and I think videos of the 70s and smokestacks and things like that, you've really tried to make a dent here and do your part. Can you talk for a few minutes on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, number one, that is the image. If anybody thinks about steel, it's the billowing coke ovens in Pittsburgh, and Nucor is 100% recycled. So we don't do any of that. We take old cars, refrigerators, washers, dryers, buildings, shred them up and melt them. And so the cleanliness of what we do, we are the cleanest steelmaker on the planet. And the reality is simply this, that the green and digital economies in our nation are going to be built on steel. The steel that it gets built with matters. And so understanding the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, understanding your carbon footprint and what you're going to do. Nucor is the first company in the world to provide a net zero carbon steel. And we shipped our first coil of that in January of this year to General Motors, because the OEMs and the big automakers have to move as they go to electric steels. They can't meet their sustainability pledges without that clean of steel. And so our commitment to the environment is unprecedented. And so in 3 months, we're going to start up one of the few plate mills in the world that can do the offshore wind towers. We couldn't be more excited because, again, we're coming online to meet that demand as that grows in the offshore wind market, and again, making a sustainable difference. And again, we're leading the world in terms of that cleanliness and that carbon footprint today.
Well, we're seeing more and more folks willing to invest and put their money up in that area too, so your timing on that seems perfect. Hopefully our work in offshore wind dovetails perfectly with yours.
Absolutely.
And then we look at folks out here, whether they're on the engineering side, the permitting side, the business and logistics side, the what happens when things go wrong side. But between the co-ops and full jobs, hopefully you'll have a chance to run into some of these folks, possibly down at that new plant.
I sure hope so.
Could you do me a favor and talk? We talk a lot with our students about trying to begin to identify mentors. And mentors don't always have to look and sound like you. They don't have to be your same major or things like that. Can you do two things for me? Maybe one, talk a little bit as you have gone through your career path, somebody that you've looked up to in a leadership role, their style, their mentorship, and how you would suggest to the students, to the cadets, the midshipmen, to be trying to really leverage that opportunity moving forward.
Yeah, well, the first thing, and I've said this a lot in my career as CEO, I'm a shameless thief of great leadership. So I'm going to steal great leadership from anywhere and everywhere before me, because if it works, man, do it, right? It's okay to not have to reinvent the wheel. And so part of that journey is I think about that mentoring, and I've learned from hundreds of people over my career. It began really with my mom. She was my first mentor. She was tough as nails. I'll never forget, we were in 3rd or 4th grade, and I'm supposed to get in this fight, and it's, schoolyard things, and I'm like, well, it's food shopping day. I gotta go and get in the car with Mom, and my sister's in there. Mom's like, what's happening? And she's like, I was supposed to fight Tommy, and she drives into the park, says, we'll get out and fight Tommy, and then we're gonna go food shopping. And that's my mom, right? And so, she was my hero growing up. She had an amazing work ethic, but also an incredible optimism about life. And so, as I've began my career, I've been a student for 31 years. I love to learn. I love to grow and experience new and different things. And so what I would tell you is that mentorship isn't a one-way street. Each of you have got to drive yourself to say, what is it I'm not good at? What do some of your other shipmates around you do really well that maybe you don't, that you can learn from and ask? And so again, I don't know that I had that early in my career, but certainly today, you know, for the last 10 or 15 years, to have the sort of confidence internally to say, I don't know. Because when you tell someone you don't know and you want to learn from them, amazing things happen because people want to teach, people want to open up. So I would just encourage you to be that lifelong learner, to take an active interest in your own development, and then look at around you, who does what you want to do, or maybe don't do so well, really well, and go ask them, go learn from them. Because again, there are skill sets that are incredibly complementary. Our executive leadership team is filled with people that are smarter, better, more equipped, more capable than I am. And that's awesome because we're gonna make better decisions as a company by doing so.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let me ask this is a great question to ask, because you've been doing great stuff. And I was like, boy, I must be locked on the entire time, never had a hiccup, never tripped and fell. I want to ask you a question about failing. And it was interesting, as I was sitting down with your family over breakfast, I had to tell this story of, and I don't know if the cadets know this, but I got fired as a cadet officer in my senior year by the then Vice President of Student Services. And 10 years later, he's the guy who hires me back to work here. Can you talk for a minute or two about a failure, whether it was here at the academy or early on in your career, and what you did with that?
You know, well, look, there's a ton, and life isn't perfect, and life isn't easy. You're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna do things that you're gonna look back on and look to change. One of the things that I would tell you, my wife and I are sort of equally yoked. We don't look back. We don't spend a lot of time lamenting about what could have been and living with remorse. But all that being said, man, there's a ton. I look back, and again, I truly didn't recognize how important my grades could be to opening different doors. Now, obviously, no regrets. God has had a plan in my life, and I've worked really hard, and doors have opened up. But you know, that for me, early on, man, I wish I applied myself differently to say, man, what other opportunities could have come had I done better. But early in my career, I wanted it all now. And one of my failures early on was, man, I had some really good wins, and I could look around the group and say, well, I'm as good or better than what they're doing. Why aren't I getting promoted? How come it's not happening now? And it took me a while to recognize in companies, it's not one win or 2 wins or weeks of wins or months of wins. It's you winning for years and years to get that opportunity to build up your credibility and your relationships. And that took me a while to learn. And so when I joined Nucor, I said to myself, I'm going to give it 7 years, because at that point I'd be really old at 35. And if I'm not where I want to be, and man, I'll do something different, but I needed to give it more time, because early on I expected and wanted it all right now.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot for that. And as I get going on this, I want to make sure we take some questions. So if you do have any kind of question or follow-up, please shoot a hand up for me there. The education program here, and some of this I might go off script on a little on this, and I don't even know if you saw any of this, so I might be off script for you all one minute now. The program here is this combination of what I think is a killer baccalaureate degree, whatever program you're in, a whole bunch of experiential learning with the C terms, and then this opportunity to be part of the leadership laboratory. Whether or not you end up in that top wedge, there's always that chance to be a leader wherever you are in an organization, and I know you believe that. Those 3 pieces of the puzzle that you had as your foundation here, can you talk about either which one you felt was the most valuable, or how each piece kind of played into your success along the way?
Give me the 3 pieces again.
Sure, it's the educational program, the degree itself, it's the hands-on aspect of life at the academy, and it's the regiment.
Yeah, I'll start with the last 2. You know, the regiment, the discipline, the environment that's built here was incredibly helpful. I mean, to this day, you know, I still look at my gig line, right? I think about like things that I can't get out of my head, which I wish I could, but I can't. You know, there are disciplines that have been baked in that have stayed with me for life, and that translates really well into business. Well, how? When you're organized, when you're equipped, when you're thinking about the attention to detail in business, it matters, and people recognize and notice. And so it's that discipline, I think, that transfers across a broad spectrum. The other was, you know, the leadership aspect.
This C-term experiential learning and that hands-on piece?
Yeah, look, for me, the C terms were amazing. And I really thought it early on I wanted to be out to sea and kind of provide or do that career path. But again, Westinghouse made me the offer, and again, it was at the right time, at the right offer, and so that's the journey I went. But that seed time put some practicality into what we were learning at the academy, and so that was really my first taste of what it was like to operate stuff and really understand some of the things you were learning theoretically. How did they apply into the field, and getting some of that hands-on experience, you know, working and watch and, you know, around a group of people that were very equally minded about wanting to be successful.
Awesome, thank you for that. As you move up in an organization, sometimes you get this sense of moving away from the people in the front lines. And it's, even here, my predecessor said, the thing about the corner office is you're that much further away from the reason why you're here, the Regiment of Cadets. Could you talk about, as you're in this position and you're chasing Wall Street or running around the world, what you have to do, how you work to try to stay connected to the teammates that you have?
Yeah, I think number one, not forgetting your past, right? You know, as I sit here today, I told my wife walking in, man, they must have somebody really important coming today, right? Because you're going through a lot of hoops. I stay very grounded in, you know, my job is no better or worse than any one of our team members at Nucor, all 31,000. My responsibilities just happen to be different. And so I think that as a backdrop is really what grounds me. The other piece of it is, as CEO of a $40 billion company, man, the pulls on my time are insatiable. There's not enough time to do, you know, I live in a series of 35 meetings, 7-minute meetings a day, right? That's really what my day looks like. And so you've got to build certain things into your life, into your cadence that keep you focused and grounded. And so we have calls with our entire executive leadership team every other week. So I can touch the leaders that are running the 31,000 team members across the world every other week. And that sort of is me tapping into that pulse and understanding really what's happening across the breadth of Nucor, understanding politically, geopolitically, how the war in Ukraine, what are the supply chain constraints, what are we doing in COP27, you know, in a couple weeks in terms of our environmental presence and footprint, how are we thinking about trading in multiples and our analysts and investors in Wall Street. So I think you've got to bake certain things in that keep you focused, and whether that's walking around for you in the academy and you know, interacting with the students, and for me, getting out to our mills and touching our team in terms of, you know, seeing how they're doing, shaking hands, talking to them every day is important.
Awesome. I want to, before I ask any of the cadets for some questions on this, I'd like to just ask for a particular real memory or two when you think back to times in the dorms, times on the ship, times with your shipmates here. Something that you know, you just sit there and get a chuckle out of, or something that you feel was pretty powerful. And it can be working off extra duty, because we probably have some folks in the crowd that have worked off some extra duty from time to time as well.
Yeah, I'll start with that quite embarrassing story. Isabel and Sophia, why don't you step out for this one? So, you know, right, the irony of irony. So, finished our junior year, summer, coming back, and me and 4 of my shipmates we're bragging, man, we're seniors now. We finally made it first class and stopped by, pick up a few cases of refreshments, hide them under our jackets, and we are living large. We're gonna just have that. And out 6 code door comes our company officer, Dugan.
Tommy Duggan.
Tommy Duggan. Hey fellas, what are you doing? Oh, crap, nothing? What you got there? Nothing? 4 weeks of weekends and nights and demerits, and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? The first day back senior year, like minute one, we get nailed. And so yeah, that was my start to our senior year, and yeah, that was not the start I was thinking about. But I mean, so many great memories. Finishing the orientation, you know, the day we were going to graduate from that orientation, we're in mess cafeteria having lunch, and all the parents are showing up early, right, because they want to see and find their kid, and they're all pressed up against the glass. And I love cereal, and had a little cereal bar, and so I get up to have my Captain Crunch, and I can't remember who it was, but some firstclassman's like, hey, Topalian, Captain Crunch has been promoted to Admiral. I think you ought to walk up to the windows and salute him all the way around the entire cafeteria. Well, I'm like this far from the parents pressed against the glass, saluting, and now they don't know what the hell's going on. So everybody's like crowding in, looking at this clown walk around the entire cafeteria in glass, you know, saluting the captain. But, you know, again, it's just one of those opportunities, and I cried for a few weeks. But after that, you know, yeah, so many good memories. My first calc exam was not exactly a stellar grade, and my company commander taped my exam to my door. And when I got back from class, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Wasn't a great grade. And so he came to see me, and he and the exco sat me down and said, you never once asked for help, and we're here to help you. And a lot of us get this and understand this really well. Why didn't you raise your hand? And that's your job, because we're here to help you, but you got to do better. And I thought, man, you know, I'd never been in an environment like that where somebody cared for me like that and took that time and that personal interest. And so, again, just one of a million data points here that have shaped my future and my life.
Incredible, incredible. Just a couple questions. Professor Murray, you want to start, sir, please?
Sir, you mentioned that you graduated and went with Westinghouse Nuclear. So field service, did you, in class of 91, did you have any nuclear class here, or did they train you?
Yeah, it was great. Actually, that was a part I really did love about the nuclear program. It was a one-year EIT program, so it was essentially your 5th year of college. And then when I got to the nuke plant, I actually worked for the utility at North Anna Nuclear Power Station. You stayed in basically a 2-year, it was called BTS, basic service training and something else, but it was reactor physics, reactor theory, thermos.
But Westinghouse did that for you.
They did.
Okay, you didn't have any nuclear
I did
here,
not, no.
and you went off and you got trained.
Yes.
Good, okay,
Yes.
excellent.
Yeah, it was really, really fascinating. Again, the breadth of the academy, right, I think enabled the transference of those skills into just a wide array of.
I was thinking we have students here, if they heard the word nuclear, they go the other way, of course, because it's a heavy-duty field, of course. But they train you. Companies will take you and train you.
Absolutely.
Sure.
In fact, I keep nothing, right? You can ask my wife, I throw everything out. I still have my training book from, 91, where you went through all that reactor physics and theory and calculating, the speed of the fission process and how to do that by hand. Like it was, that piece of it was awesome. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think when we were here, the nuclear elective didn't exist.
No.
And yet a number of grads were going into the field, and what we've seen is that is really coming back around again. Some of that is what you see in the industry starting up with nukes, and some of it are still grads in the field, particular Dave Menai from 83 down at PSE&G in New Jersey, bringing student interns down who end up with job offers to continue down that exact same path, Professor Murray. Great question. Some questions from, oh, yes, sir, follow up?
Take another, because I'm full of questions.
Good afternoon, sir. Shipman First Class Bagman. How do you go about dealing with stresses every day that are presented to you from these meetings and being so high up in the company?
Honestly, like having an amazing wife and kids that support my career is probably the biggest thing. What I found early on in my career was, you know, I didn't want to go party. That wasn't my scene. Like, I'd done that a lot. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like that. I wouldn't live. I was just ready to move on. And so, you know, Kim has supported me through, again, 10 moves over 30 years. She's given up her career. She's a therapist and counselor by training everywhere we've gone. And so if I'm not working, I'm at home. That's my hobby. That's what I do. I spend time with my kids and my family because there's so many demands. I used to run all the time, and that was kind of my de-stressor. The last 2 years in this role, I have done zero. And so actually, come Monday morning, that's it. I'm getting the trainer, I'm starting back. But you know, that was typically my de-stressor. But again, my wife being a counselor, I get a lot of therapy time at home to you know, help me kind of deal with that, because it is a lot. And you know, trying to unpack that or just carry that by yourself is difficult. The other thing I would be very remiss if I didn't tell you is I have an amazing team around me, and Ben Pickett is with us today, and his wife Joanna. Where's Joanna? There's Joanna. Ben is our general manager of government affairs, and basically all things that I'm going to enter into and do. He does an amazing job of sort of that pre-screen before I end up in Dubai or Egypt or in the middle of ISIS or anywhere else in our speaking engagements. And so, you know, there are times where I can just tell him, like, I'm not coming in until noon, and he makes sure that some of those runways are clear to be able to have some of that time to focus. Thank you for that question.
Wonderful. Yes, sir.
Morning, sir. Second class Bruce Douglas. Thanks for coming today. I wanted to ask, along the growth of your career path, as you start to get these bigger leadership positions, how did you settle into that? Did you kind of feel a little resistant, stressed out by it? How did you really start accepting these new roles and responsibilities that came up with having to take charge?
Yeah, look, I think there was a matriculation, so it, again, didn't happen overnight. And I got into a company like Nucor where I got to see great leadership. You know, if you don't know Nucor, there's case studies all over the world about us, and from Harvard and their MBA program, and Good to Great with Jim Collins. And so I got to really be a student of watching it well. The other thing that I would tell you in growing up and in my family, one of the greatest pieces of advice I can give you from a leadership perspective is you got to have courage. One of the things in the hallmarks of Nucor is open communication. And while that sounds really nice, we don't talk about it as a hallmark about when things are going really well, because anybody can do that. Open communication means having the courage to shut the door and have a really, really difficult conversation, because Nucor's not for everybody. We expect and demand an awful lot from our team members, and that means there are going to be sacrifices. And so having the courage to sit down and say, look, you sucked at this, and this can't happen again, and you know, seeing that eye to eye. And again, we do it professionally, we do it one-on-one, but having the courage to confront conflict is a really important ingredient in business. And if you view conflict as negative, you're not going to do it. To me, conflict isn't negative. It's like my wife and I have been married 30 years. Man, we fight, but our fights are grounded in love, and we get stronger from them, not further apart. And so to me, conflict isn't a negative thing. It's an opportunity for you to say, this didn't go well, and I saw this, and man, you can tell me, well, you saw this, and I didn't like, and you end up in a better place. And so that, to me, of all the aspects of leadership, being able to confront difficult situations and have the courage to openly communicate what's happening in your business is really important with your team. And again, I've had a great team around me. I've made a lot of mistakes. You know, there's early days, I can tell you, my leadership, where, man, I was all jacked up on Mountain Dew running 100 miles an hour. And one of the greatest experiences of my life was I was so far out in front of our team, I was all alone. And that was a really weird experience, because, you know, I knew we should be here, but our team was stuck here. And I'm still standing here going, are they going to catch up? And I realized again early on that no, it was my job to go back, meet them where they were at, and bring them with me, rather than hoping and expecting that they were going to run at the same pace and speed I was wanting to. Thank you for the question.
Great, thanks. Some other questions from the cadets? Yes.
Good morning, sir. So that's an incredible story.
make sure I understand the question. Taking your first step
In an environment that you don't know if you can succeed in.
look, I think that is a two-way street, and that's a real feel for all of us, right? I can remember sitting down with our first CEO when we were about to go to Australia. He said, look, I want you to move to Australia with your family and 2 little kids and go run this thing called HighSmelt. And I'm looking at him, and the only thing that was over there at the time were 12 PhDs in chemical engineering. And I looked at our CEO and I'm like, Dan, I don't even know how to spell HighSmelt. And he said, if I didn't think you could do the freaking job, I wouldn't have offered it to you. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna be the best HighSmelt guy you've ever had, and now I'm gonna go learn what it is. So there are times you're gonna get thrown into the deep end. And I think that's where you rely on you. You don't try to be someone else. You don't try to mimic someone else. You be you. And it was one of the wonderful things about getting confronted with how do I bring value. And I wasn't gonna help the PhDs in chemical engineering how to figure out how to do the metallurgy. It was bringing a leadership perspective, bringing an organizational perspective, bringing the business mind to them. And so there's going to be fear. All of you are going to have the opportunity to be way over your heads in your career. You're going to be given a job that you're like, I don't know if I can do it or not. And you do, and you give it everything you got, and you stay hungry and humble, and you're going to be really, really fine. Yeah, I have no doubt. And again, I think the Academy prepares you really well to that. But expect that. That's coming. You're going to be over your head, and you're going to be, heck. When I got promoted to this job, I'm like, dear God, what have they done? Am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to pull this off? I got to go on national TV, and I don't want to go on national TV. That freaked me out. And I worked really hard. I practiced an awful lot. And so those value sets that you're learning here are going to pave the way really well for all of you as you head into the business world.
The follow-up to that is, what if we bust out transcripts and look at chemistry grades from our undergrad traffic? Really interesting. Another question, I thought I saw another hand go up over on the other side. Well, we're thinking of that. I got a great one for you. We've worked very, very hard to fill our role as a public university, especially on matters of building a diverse workforce and a diverse community. In the industries we serve, engineering, predominantly white, predominantly male, the maritime world, predominantly white, predominantly male. We've seen some wonderful changes on that in the industry and right here on this very campus. Can you talk about your perspective of that with Nucor and some of the steps and commitments you've made and what you see?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would tell you, we're a publicly traded company. We're listed as number 98 on the Fortune 500 by Fortune's best, run companies in America. But the CEO drives that culture. So the CEO gets to instill and sort of inculcate how the company moves and thinks about things. And so what I would tell you is, the question you're asking, I could give a very candid and safe answer. But the reality is, when the murder of George Floyd occurred 2.5 years ago, at first I couldn't watch a video, and Kim's like, have you seen it? I'm like, no, I don't think I can do it. She's like, you're the CEO of 31,000 team members, you have to watch it. And it was crushing, it was heartbreaking to see another human being. And through that lens, I engaged our team members, our diverse team members of color and different backgrounds, and asked different questions. And what was the experience that they were feeling at Nucor? What did they feel safe? What were the experiences that they held? And how do we shape and change the outlook of the future of Nucor forever? And what I heard and the answers I got were not what I expected. And some of the feedback was really hard. There were environments that sucked. There were divisions that did a miserable job with that. And we made a lot of changes based on the questions that I was asking. And as a result, in 2020, within a few months of taking over, for the first time in the history of Nucor, we had executives that were promoted that were diverse. In the 60-year history of Nucor, the first diverse executives in Nucor were promoted in 2020. And while you'd say, well, maybe that's a good thing, and you're changing, why did it take 60 years for that to happen? And so what I would tell you is, it requires a deliberacy. It requires a focus. None of the team members that were promoted in Nucor got promoted because they were male or female or black or white or They got promoted because they were awesome freaking people that prior, we did not have the discipline in deliberacy in thinking about that. That transcends today in our organization where there's no quotas, there's no numbers. We're not gonna ever do that. We're gonna promote the right people, but we're gonna do it very, very intentionally and have a focus on making sure we bring the best and brightest to, again, diversify our thought process as well to make Nucor the strongest organization in the world.
Congratulations on that. It's pretty powerful in a similar path here, and for you to really have that courage to look back and say, not just let's just celebrate where we're at, let's still ask the question of why did it take so long. We like to remind ourselves, this place became co-ed under court order. And we got a lot of work to do our part, and we continue to try to build that community. So thank you very much for that. Some other questions as we wrap up in about the next 5 minutes or so?
Morning, sir. Have you ever been presented with a decision that goes against your morals or your ethics? And if so, how did you go about overcoming that decision? And if not, how do you go about making decisions?
Yeah, look, that's a fantastic question, and I would tell you, I've been with Nucor now 26 years, and you know, my first address to our team was about 3 weeks before the global pandemic hit, and so I live streamed to, at the time, our 30,000 team members to share our values. In the audience right in front of me as I was speaking was my boss at the time, the chairman of our board. And I told 28,000 team members of our company that the most important thing in life is not steel making and profits. It's them and their values. And so, you know, at that point, you know, I'm in a position now where I will never compromise my values. And so within Nucor, in that framework, no is the short answer. But I think there have been times that that's gotten challenged, you know, personally and professionally in different environments. And so each of you staying grounded to your value sets is gonna be important, because you may get asked to do things that aren't above board, aren't scrupulous, or are, you know, scrupulous. And so I've never had that situation happen personally, but there's been enough times and colleagues in other companies where I've seen it, watched it, and it really sets a moral cancer inside the organization. And so, you know, the second part of your question is how do you deal with it if, you know, I think it's about you staying very grounded to, you know, what your value sets are and never compromising on that. You'll have tough choices to make, and again, I've had a lot of those where I had to walk away from certain groups and parties within Nucor to not do something, but I was never gonna do that, and I was never gonna compromise my value set. Because at the end of the day, you don't get to control a lot of different things in business. One of the things you get to control is your integrity. And the only one that can compromise your integrity is you. And so if your gut is screaming and you know it's the wrong thing to do, don't do it. Walk away. Have the courage to be the only one doing it and walk away, but walk away. Yeah. Great question.
Right.
How about a question for you guys? So I saw a lot of hands with the job fair. What were some of your takeaways? What did you see? Did any offers yet? They making offers today or now? Not yet. Is there another career fair like coming back in the spring, or? Yes. What worries you most about entering the workforce? What are you scared of? What are you worried about?
Taxes.
Taxes?
Taxes.
Taxes, oh God, yeah. Especially in your, you know, the wonderful state of Massachusetts, it's really high, yeah. What else? Because you're gonna pay them wherever you're at, yes, sir.
Job security.
Job security, yeah, that's a good one. Market's changing, isn't it? Is it softening a little bit up here?
It's actually been booming as of late. You know, we went from 5 or 10 years ago, I'd be telling the seniors, this is a challenging market. You got to have that resume up. You got to be on.
Yep.
And right now, it is a booming market for the graduating seniors.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So as you're thinking about job security, what questions are you asking the companies to understand what that means for them?
Well, during the career fair, the company I asked what their track record was specifically during COVID. A lot of turnouts were when companies had let go.
Yeah.
A lot of people, other companies, it was great when they said they didn't drop anyone. So that was pretty huge to me.
Yeah.
Because that means success in life for your company in the streets, so.
Well, I'll tell you, and I don't know if any of you have your resumes with you, Ben, we'll take them at the door. In our 60-year history, we've never had a single layoff in the history of Nucor, ever. In 2020, when the global pandemic hit, certain sectors of our economy completely shut down. 2/3 of our team are on what we call production bonus. So about 2/3 of their pay is at risk. Well, 2/3 of your pay is at risk, and that goes to zero. Now you're worried about, can I make the mortgage payment? Can I keep my kid at Mass Maritime? Can I keep, the things that I have in my life going? And we instituted something we've never done in our history, which was a guaranteed weekly minimum pay. So we guaranteed their pay through that pandemic, so they wouldn't have to make that decision. They wouldn't have to worry about that. The other thing that we're doing that, I couldn't be more proud, and again, it's taken a little bit of time. We're starting a new mill in West Virginia. It'll be the largest steel mill we've ever built at nearly $3 billion. It'll be about 1,000 team members. But one of the things about West Virginia is it's been ravaged with, the geopolitical climate, and no pun intended, and the war on coal. So tens of thousands of jobs have been eliminated. So the adage in West Virginia is the most transferable thing, or the biggest export of West Virginia is able-bodied men and women leaving the state. Well, when you take that away and jobs go away, what happens? Despair and loss of hope. Well, that's the reason why West Virginia is the #1 opioid addiction state in the entire U.S. And so there's a lot of single moms trying to make a decision. Do I go into the workforce, or do I try to afford childcare and go back to work, or do I stay on government assistance? And it's a horrible decision. And so for the first time in Nucor's history, we're going to build and have Nucor-led childcare. We're going to educate those women in that state to come into Nucor, to give them a manufacturing certificate, and then they're going to have a safe place for their children. We're going to have lactation rooms inside the facility, so they never have to make that compromise of, can I afford to go back to work, or do I have to stay on government assistance because I can't afford childcare? So there are things that we're doing that, again, have taken a while, but I couldn't be more proud of how we're shaping the future of Nucor.
Just fantastic, just fantastic. Okay, as we look to kind of wrap things up here, as people get ready to roll to the next class, I got one that I just have to ask you as you're sitting here and I see your class ring on your finger. Do you tell us the story of your class ring, because it's a pretty unique.
Absolutely. And how many of you have got a class ring? Okay, so a lot less hands than went to the job fair. And it was interesting because our son was sort of the same way. When he was graduating from Butler University, he and his wife, both Butler grads, I said, hey, you're going to get a class ring? Nah, I just don't really care. It's not that big a deal. And so in 1991, it wasn't a big deal to me. Couldn't afford it really anyway, and I didn't get one. Man, start moving throughout your career, getting a little older, and Kim's like, well, why don't you get a class ring? I'm like, and I started looking into it and kind of died off. 15 years go by, 20 years go by, 25 years go by, 30 years go by. I'm like, I really want a freaking class ring. And so I started making the calls, and it went from Johnston's to Balfour, and then I tried to get people at Johnston. Well, long story short, found the right people at Johnston's that said, we can't release anything without a legal release from Mass Maritime saying we could actually even tell you if we still have the molds. AKA Ben Pickett, who also is an attorney. So he helps and works with Mass Maritime to get the release. Go back to Johnston's, find the release. Weeks later, they tell us, well, we found the molds from 1991 of your class ring, and for an alarmingly, shockingly high number, we will make one ring for you. And so after 30 years and a lot of work by Ben Pickett and my wife, encouragement, I got my class ring last year, again, after 30 years. Because again, I didn't recognize at the time. I am so proud of Mass Maritime. I am so proud of being a graduate from this academy. that I love to wear this ring. I love to have people ask me, hey, where do you go to school? And so if you haven't got it, get it. Put it up, give it to your parents, let them keep it in the safe for you. At some point, I promise you, you're gonna go, man, I'm glad I got that ring, because it's a really tough process 30 years later to get one made. So, thank you guys for your attention. Thank you for what you do. Great luck to you at your academy and your next careers. And again, thank you for the hospitality, for my family and I being here today. God bless.
Ladies and gentlemen.